after that, I remember we went. Well, I somehow or another I dealed him out of that baby oval, and I talked him out of it, or what. I don't know what I offered him my crop or what I done, or part of it, or whatever. But I got the baby oval from him anyhow, and it was a touring, like I said, and the top wasn't any good anyway, and so I just went out there one day and sawed it off right behind the front seat, and I was going to put me a bed on there and make me a pickup. I wanted me a pickup out of that baby Oakland. So I went out and got that done right. It didn't take me very long to get that done. It's, like kids will do. And I never growed up until, I don't know if I growed up yet or not. I'm trying. Anyway, I cut that thing off and still didn't have nothing on it, just the hind wheels sticking out there. And just a day or two later, after we got all settled, maybe a week or two after we got home or something like that, and we went out for a ride one day, and my stepsister, the oldest stepsister there, she always went along with us, and we went somewhere, she'd go along with us, and so we went, me and my wife and her, and we went over there, just running around through the country, and it was red hills over there, and red clay country, and it was fine. While we was out there, it come rain, it just poured down rain, and boy, we didn't have no cover over that or nothing, and here I was going down the road, and the wheels were spinning, and that mud clay was going way up in the air, and it was even hitting our windshield and whatever. But we wasn't going fast enough, it was throwing it in front of us, and we were just slipping and sliding and having a lot of fun. And it tickled my sister to death. My wife was just, I guess she was ready to be, wishing she was back in Missouri. I'm sure she was wishing she was back in Missouri already. And in fact, she told me a lot of times she wished she hadn't married me. Yeah. Anyway, I know she was wishing she was back in Missouri right then for sure. So we went, time we got home, and she had on the same dress she got married in, and I don't know how many dresses she had or anything, but this one she had bought that spring. She had picked strawberries for it and bought a dress, and it was a pretty little dress, and it was no wedding dress, but it was her wedding dress. In other words, she got married in it, so it was really pretty, and I was proud of her and the dress. But somehow or another, there wasn't much of it. We didn't have too good a choice anyway. We had to get home anyhow, so. That was a pretty sight, I'll tell you, and I think it stained it up with that old clay. I don't know if it ever did come clean or not, but anyway, things just went on, and it never did seem to do much good, whatever there. But the next year, then we went with Frank Moore's brother-in-law wanted us to sharecrop with him, and so. We went down to sharecrop with him, and we had a little house down there with the two-room house. It wasn't much of a house, but it was okay, I guess. And my stepfather and folks were going to live in that, and he was going to build me a room on the end of it. He was going to build another room on the end for me and my wife, and so I think we was all eating together. I'm pretty sure we was all just living together, except when we had our own separate room for our living quarters. Anyway, there we found out that she was pregnant, and there was going to be a youngster coming on there, and for some reason it was pretty soon. It was just too soon, actually. Well, whatever. Then at like a couple of weeks, being 9 months there, and this little boy was born to us, and that was James Wallace Miller. But now I want you to understand there wasn't any hanky-panky. It just turned out like that. And we don't know what happened that he was born early, but he was a nice plump little boy, that's for sure. Well, we made a crop there that year, and I don't remember now how we come out, what we made out of it or anything. I know we didn't do very much, and I remember that year that she wanted to see her parents. Of course, she'd been away from them a year, and she'd never been out of the house before in her lifetime, and it was hurting real bad. And so, but I went off to the harvest. We'd always go to the harvest if there's any chance to go into harvest, make a little money when the crops are laid by, and try to make something out of it. And so the what I went off. My brother-in-law was in the harvest up in Perryton, Texas, and so I decided I'd run off up there, and I hitchhiked up there and to see if I could get a job, and they was just finishing up, so I didn't get a job there, and I went with them a little farther up into the edge of Colorado there and got a little bit of work, and then I moved over into Nebraska, and I got a job there scooping wheat, and I made a little, and I sent her some money, and she got enough there to get I think she went on the bus or train. I don't remember what she did, but she went back to her folks and I was going to go back when I got through with the harvest. I was going to go down there, and then we'd come back together. So I went down when I got through there, and she went on down to meet her folks, and she hadn't been there but just a day or two when I got there, actually. But I went by her brother's place in Kansas City. I rode the train down there. After I didn't spend the money, I rode the train down there, and we went on. After we was down there a day or two, we were down there. I was down there a day or two, I guess, or maybe a week, something like that, and visiting with them when her brother come on down from Kansas City, and they was on their vacation, so they come on down there, and we was messing around. We went to the reunion. We went to they called it a reunion. It was like a little fair, what it was, and we went to that reunion there that one night in his car, and a whole bunch of the family went, and they all could get in his car, and some was standing on fenders. He was even riding the fenders. I know it was only about 6 miles down there, so you could get by with a lot of things then you didn't get by with now anyway. So when we come back, well, he went over a railroad track, and he was a little bit, he had drank too much of his beer there, and he was kind of run along the edge of where the dirt wasn't high enough there, and it's pretty rough, and I think he broke a spring on that little Chevrolet touring car, and so he broke a spring on that, and we got on home in there, and the next night, next night we went to church with one of her brothers, I believe it was. I'm not sure. I don't remember how we got to church or what we did, but we went to church anyhow that one. And I'd always been kind of, kind of conscious. I was raised up. My mother was a praying woman and everything, and went to church a lot when I was growing up. And went to church, but I didn't partake of church up until that time, and so I was pretty aggravating at times too, and I used bad words and stuff like that, and things, and I guess well, I didn't realize how much it would upset my wife at that time either, and she wasn't into anything like that. So we went to church that night, and right away I got under conviction, and I was just about to pass out and whatever there. And, well, I finally went up to the altar and prayed through, and I thank the Lord that I did that. So that put me on the good side of the Lord there. So uh, things changed for us. It changed it quite a bit, but for as finances, it never changed, I guess. But we got then we could communicate better and everything. My wife didn't talk very much, and I never really knew how she felt, but sometimes she'd it just somehow or another we didn't communicate at all, and that wasn't too good either. So anyway, we after we went on back home, then things went along there, and I don't remember whether the crops were out yet or whether what happened, but something was going wrong anyhow. The thing is, there was no money in you could get a hold of or anything. And we decided to go back to Missouri, and we decided to take our little boy with us. Well, this was the next year now. Yeah, the next year when we decided to go back to Missouri to her folks, and we didn't have any money. We didn't have no way to go or anything. We had money to eat on or stuff like that, I guess. I know we had money because we had bought my son some little overalls. We bought him some cute little overalls and had this little bib pocket and all that stuff up there on it and whatever. And that's where we put our money at. So in case that somebody robbed us or something, we figured that if he was carrying the money, they wouldn't get it. So he's the guy that carried the money. And I've never told him that. I don't reckon he knows it. To this day, I don't guess he knows that he carried the money. Anyway, he carried all we had. Well, I don't remember how much we had, but we had quite a little bit. Now, we hitchhiked all the way down. And we got down below Claremore. We were down below Claremore there a ways. I remember some of the things, that really stand out. We got a ride with two Indian boys. They picked us up and they scared us almost to death. We was going out towards what's the name of that place? Anyway, it was going towards Neosho from Tulsa. Or from Claremore, rather. We already passed there. We was out past Claremore. And we was going on towards Neosho there. And we're still in Oklahoma. Before we got to Wyandotte, anyway, is Miami, I believe, was the name of the place, right in there somewhere close to Miami. There was a road that they had paved a strip, and it was only about 10 feet wide. They paved a strip of road through there, and it was only about 10 feet wide. And these Indian boys was trying this car out. They had a brand new car, and they was trying this car out, and they was driving 70 miles an hour down that road. Now, when they meet somebody, they was supposed to pull off and give half of it, but they just taking the whole road and let the other people pull plumb off in the dirt. And they was scaring me and her both to death. And we drove with them for about 30 miles, I guess, and we told them we wanted out, or they was going maybe just that far. I don't remember now, but we got out of that anyway. And that was something. We went on down to Missouri. So I don't know what happened then for a while. I guess my folks must have come on down there, and we went back with them. Anyway, I know I got a job working for a fellow, an elder man called Jimmy Jones. He lived between where we've been farming at in Elk City and a couple of miles up there. And so he wanted to hire me, and he furnished me a house, and he furnished me a quart of milk a day, and I think that's all. Anyhow, we moved over there, me and my wife, and he paid me $1.25 a day, and I was a big job, $1.25 a day, because Depression hit in 1929. This is 1931. It's not much better, if any. So in 1931, I guess it was, something like that. Anyway, we went to work for him, and so I enjoyed it. We both enjoyed it. Actually, it was just an elderly man and his older sister. I think his sister was as old as he was, almost as old as he was, and he had another sister almost as old as she was. But the other sister was crippled, and they lived there all alone. And he had a lot of Bremer cows. He had the milk strain, not Bremers. I said that wrong. Anyway, they was beef cattle, but they weren't red, a white face or anything, but they was roan cattle that they was. I forget the name of them now, but they was roans, and there was a milk strain, so they give quite a bit of milk anyway, and he liked to feed them and pet them and milk them. He was getting pretty. He couldn't see too well, but he knowed all of his cows, and he could feel them and tell which one. When he went down in front of them feeding them, why he'd always feel of their head to see which cow he was feeding, because when he put them in the stanchions, he couldn't tell them apart, I guess, and they go into stanchions. Sometimes if they'd go in the wrong stanchion, he didn't feed them by number down the row when he was feeding them. He fed them by feeling of their heads. So never put any feed in front of the cow without feeling of her head. So he'd feel of her head, and then he'd feed her the amount of feed that she needed. And so, he had his horses there. He had a couple of nice teams of horses, and I worked for him. And I'd get up in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, and go out and harness the horses and give them their feed. After he showed me what he wanted them fed, I fed the horses myself. I'd go out and feed the horses and come back in. I'd put the harness on them, though, when I fed them. I'd feed them, curry them, and harness them and get them all ready to go, the ones I was going to use. And if he was going to use a team, I did his also. So I got them ready, and I would go back in the house, and 4 o'clock, I went out got up at 4 and went out and done that. And then I went back into the house, and my wife would have breakfast ready, and we would sit down. We would eat breakfast, and when we'd get through eating breakfast we'd just sit around and talk and play with the boy and kind of enjoy life there. And whenever got just about 5 minutes or 10 minutes to 7, I'd go out and bring the team out of the barn and hook them on to whatever I was going to work that day and work with, and so we'd go. Well, I had to pump water for the cattle, so sometimes I would pump water earlier. Before I went out, I'd pump water. But most of the water pumping that I did was in the wintertime. He did the pumping, I think, in the summer. If I can remember it right, I think he did it in the summer, because I can only remember doing the pumping in the wintertime. So anyway, we'd go out and work, and he'd usually go along. He'd usually take a team, or else he'd go with me in whatever we was going to do there. And so he had to work for me every day of the week. If I wanted to work 7 days, I worked 7 days. If it was pouring down rain or whatever it was doing, he had work for me. And in the barn, and he would go out in the field in the summertime and pick through the field, and he'd get heads off of the maize and off of the cane or off of whatever he growed out there. Or if it was corn or whatever it was, he would select the seed. And if it was maize or any of those kind, or corn, actually, he'd save it and he'd keep it in the barn. He'd stack it away, and leave it just like that. And then when it was rainy weather and I couldn't do anything outside, then he'd send me up to the barn loft, and I'd go up in the barn loft and rub that stuff off on the rub board, on the regular old wash and rub board like they used to wash clothes with back in those days and earlier than that. And so that way, why, I'd have something to do. So I got paid. If I wanted to work 7 days, I worked 7 days in that $1.25. But then when we went to the grocery store at that time, now that don't sound like any money at all, but when we went to the grocery store, it wasn't that bad. We could go into the grocery store and 50 pounds of gold medal flour, it was in a 50-pound sack. We never thought about buying a 5-pound or 10 pounds. I don't know if they even had them or not. But we bought 50 pounds at a time, big 50-pound sack of gold medal, or any brand. I think Carnation had one, and somebody else had one that was the top, the very top, and cost 60 cents. It cost 60 cents for 50 pounds. That's a little over 1 cent a pound. No, it's not even 1 cent a pound. That's right. It was a half a hundred. And 60 cents would be 50 pounds would be, yeah, it's a little over 1 cent a pound, I guess. Anyway, I'm not going to figure it up now. So that would cost that. And the only high thing was lard, shortening. Well, we didn't buy shortening, usually buy lard, but hog lard. And hog lard was, at that time, was 15 cents a pound. And that was the highest thing. But now we could buy meat. We could buy hog joes or side bacon or anything like that. Cured meat, not breakfast bacon. That was a little special, but just regular meat, hog meat was a 6 cents a pound. So you could buy 6 cents a pound and fry your meat for breakfast and have meat for breakfast, have enough grease to do the rest of your cooking all day, so you didn't have to buy lard. That no need to buy the 15 cent a pound stuff like that. So we didn't buy it. Anyway, we could fill up, if we wanted to, with half of our wages, we could fill our back of our little pickup completely full. I mean, when we first went there, we didn't have no car, we had a pickup. But on Saturdays, every Saturday, we had to shop for him. And sometimes he'd go along and do the shopping, but I had to go. And so I got paid. I got paid for going. And it would always be a short day. We'd go in the morning, we'd get the team ready and get up there, and we had 6 or 7 miles to go to town. And I got to town, put the team up, and go do the shopping. If he went along, he did the shopping, and I did my shopping or whatever, and then I helped, and I loaded his stuff, or they loaded it for me or whatever, and we went back. But if he sent me just, I went by myself. Well, I had to take it to the grocery store, and it never had to fool with any cash or anything. We just took an order, and the grocery man would write it up and everything, and he'd pay him later on. So we didn't have to worry with anything like that, but that was fine. Well, we went along for a while there, and I worked, I don't know how long I worked for him, a year or so. I don't think I worked for him much over a year, and it was such a good job, and I fooled around and gave it up. We went to Missouri after that. I don't know how long it was before we went, but we went on Missouri, and my wife's father and mother was pretty old, and we was kind of thinking that they thought anyway that we could kind of help them out, and I could farm their old place there, and we could make pretty good and get along all right there. So we went down there and tried it, and well, I don't remember anything about getting down there, but we went down there anyway to their place, and So we was there quite a while. We had quite a lot of fun, and we went to church a lot, and we enjoyed it. We sure enjoyed going to church. And I remember in the spring, long in March, sometime. Well, it was about the 20th of March, I guess, and me and my brother-in-law had been to church that day. We went to church that evening. My wife didn't go, and she stayed home. And it was her little niece was there. Her brother's little girl was there too, and we had our little boy. And then me and him went to church, and we walked about 5 miles. We walked about 5 miles to church and 5 miles back, and went over there, and he had, well, they called it prayer meeting. And we went there, and we had a real good time. It helped pretty late, and we didn't get home about walking for another 5 miles. Well, we didn't get home until it was about, I don't know what. It was 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock or something. When we got home, well, my wife told me that she had gas, that she'd been having some pains. She said she ate some beans, and she'd been having some gas pains. Well, she was pregnant, and so we knew all about that, of course, but we didn't know just when that she was supposed to give birth to any baby. So we were there, and I got home, and she told me that, and so and a few minutes later, not more than an hour anyway, why she decided that she was having labor pains. It was hitting her. So, well, we never made any arrangements for nothing except her brother's wife was going to deliver the baby, because she was real good at it, and she done a lot of it, and so she was going to do that, and so, well, we went. I had to go get him. I had to go get her, and she lived about 8 or 10 miles away, and I didn't have no way to go. And I went down to a neighbor's house, about a mile and a half, I guess, down the canyon there. I went down there and woke the poor guy up, asked him if he'd take me over there, and he got up and got his clothes on. And he took me over to her house, and we got her and got back, and we just got back in good time. And she delivered the baby, and then it was born after 12 o'clock. That made it the 21st of March. So that was our daughter. Our second child was the daughter, and the baby was born that morning, and it stormed. It was the most beautiful night that night until just about daylight or morning time. It started the storming. It happened to be the first day of spring that year, and it come a kind of a storm, not a big bad storm, but it stormed anyway, and it's kind of funny how the weather changed so quick. And anyway, she was a pretty little redhead. You know, they're not so pretty when they're first born, but she was a pretty little redhead anyway. So we got that over with, and eventually, well, I'll go back a little farther there. Before she was even born there, we had left our things, whatever we had, most everything, even clothes, baby clothes, or whatever we had out there at my mother's house, and they lived out there in Elk City, and it was 300 miles away, and so I had hitchhiked out there. I hitchhiked out there to get those baby clothes, and on the way between in that area somewhere, the fellow that I had sold my car to when I went to California, long before I ever married. I was in the earlier tapes. If anybody had listened to all of them, but I had sold the car, and he had never paid me any more. I hadn't even seen him or anything, so I never had got him more money from him. And so I went by his house. I needed money so bad. I went by his house, and I hitchhiked all the way to my mother's, though, and got a bundle of clothes and stuff, and hitchhiked back. When I stopped at his place, and I asked him if he could pay me any money, and he said he just didn't have it. And so I told him, I said, I tell you what, if things had changed quite a bit since the time that I'd sold him the car for $75, and so I'd sold it to him for $150, but he still owed me $75. I said, listen, if you can rustle me $10, if you can give me $10, the debt will be paid. If you want to pay the debt, rustle me up $10. And so they rustled, him and his wife talked a while, and they rustled me up $10, and I thanked him a whole big bunch, because we needed it real bad, and on account of the baby coming. And I got back there, and of course, then we was all ready for the baby, except there was no doctor to be got, and we just kind of lived on the money I got from him, I guess. And anyway, we got that taken care of. I just wanted to go back and mention that there, and I'm gonna. Well, we went back to western Oklahoma. We went back to Elk City. It didn't work out too good there with the folks, and she had a brother that was, I guess he was living kind of hard. He'd kind of come over once in a while and get part of the groceries that we had and whatever. And wasn't anything we could do about it. We just kind of got disgusted, and we just pulled out and went back up there, and we got back up in western Oklahoma around there to Elk City. And I think I don't know, I guess we just went back to my mama's the first thing, went back to the folks' place there for a few days. And then I got a job from a fellow there pulling some bullies that year, and I went over there and to pull bulls for him, and we had this little just a little bitty shack of a thing, probably about 10 by 12 or 8 by 12 or something like that he had out there, and he said we could live in it. So we went and got in there, and we got all fixed up, and we didn't have no bed or anything. We just put our beds down in the corner over there, and we fixed some orange crates and whatever, and made some cabinets, and put a shelf up, and put a water bucket and a dipper in there, and everything was lovely. But this guy, he was a nice fellow, and he had a cat there. They had a cat, and every time we would open our door, it just had a screen door on it. Every time we would open our door, well, that stinking cat, he would come in. He would get in that door, no matter what you did, he'd get in that door ahead of you. And we didn't have room in there for no cat. And I didn't like cats anyway, and I don't know if she did or not. We didn't want the cats in there with the kids, because that was close living. I mean, and we had that place fixed up so pretty. We had taken magazines and made up dough, thin dough, and we used it for glue, thin dough for glue, and we pasted them magazine pages. We took the pages out of the magazines, and we papered that thing all over the ceiling and all. It had almost a flat ceiling in it, and it was low. I could I was just a little above my head anyway. So we got it all prettied up and everything, but we just couldn't stand that cat. And I'd read somewhere, or somebody told me, that cats were afraid of possum. So I didn't know where there was a possum at, but there was possums around there. I knew out there, back in the hills there, in the canyons or whatever. So I'd heard that, and I might have read it on one of them magazines or something, but we pasted up on the wall for all I know. But I heard it, and I didn't know if it's true or not, but I was willing to try it. And I told my wife, I said, I'm going to go down in the canyon, see if I can find a possum. And I went down, and I dug around stumps and whatever, poked around, punched around, and I found a possum. And I took the possum home, carried him home, and them things are kind of dangerous. They'll bite you, and they just hang on. So, and it's easy to get poison from one of them too. So if he bites you, you don't have poison, but you can get contamination or whatever there. Anyway, I had a hold of his back of his neck there. You make him saw, and I get him by the back of the neck and then hold to his tail, carry him with so that he don't bite me or anything. And when I got home, got in there, and she was over in the corner, her and the kids, and so I went and I opened the door to go in, and that cat beat me in there. And the cat was in there, and so, well, here we go. I turned the loose of his head because the cat was there. Now I knew he'd key his attention. He would watch that cat, regardless of what the cat done. The possum was going to watch the cat. So I just stayed a hold of his tail and turned his head loose. And when I turned his head loose, so and kind of punched him at that cat. That cat spit at him and jumped, and his hair all turned up. And I kept punching that cat and punching that possum toward the cat, and the cat got real scared. And I mean, he just had a fit. He went out up the wall. He climbed the wall. He climbed it so fast he went over the ceiling and just he just barely hit. Went almost over the whole ceiling before he would hit the floor again. And when he'd hit the floor, I'd be right behind him, poking that possum at him. He'd go over it again. He'd go into orbit every time I'd poke that cat at him on the floor. He'd go up a wall, so he'd come down somewhere. And I just kept poking that cat at him there for a while. I was really going to do it good. I wanted to do a good job, make a good job out of it, and I kept poking that cat, and boy, that thing was going into orbit. And he went around and around and around and around there, and all of a sudden, I decided to let him out. I let him out, and I told my wife, I'm going to take this possum back out here and turn him loose. The fur would be worth something, but I didn't want to kill him because he done me a favor. Excuse me. I thought he'd done me a favor anyway. So I went off out there. I only went about 100 yards the other side of the barn there and just turned the possum loose. I knew he'd go back where he belonged anyway, to his home where I found him. So I turned him loose and I went back up there. And she's sitting over there in the corner crying. Well, I know what's the matter. And when I first went in, and then I smelled something, and then I found out that cat had been spraying that wall. He'd been spraying the wall. He sprayed the ceiling. He sprayed the floor. Boy, I'll tell you, that was one more mess. And it was kind of late in the afternoon in the winter time, kind of in the fall. It's kind of cool, real cool. So we had to tear all that paper off that wall. We scrubbed out walls and ceilings and the whole business. We started all over again. We cleaned that thing with lye and hot water and lye and oh brother, we scrubbed that floor and we got that thing all cleaned up. And then, of course, the next day we went in there and we papered it all over, done the same thing again. So we made it okay there, but I'll tell you, we never did have no more cat. That cat, he still lived there at that man's house, but he never come near our door again. Ever long as we lived there, he never even come close to our door. So then I pulled bowls for that guy there, and then in the winter it got a little colder, and boy, come a big snow, and my folks lived about 3.5 miles away, and we wanted to go over there, and we didn't have no car, we didn't have no way to go, and we couldn't carry both those kids, and my wife's not very big anyway, she wasn't very big, she couldn't carry one of those kids, I couldn't carry one that far. Very well. So I made a sled. I made a little sled and got an old wash tub, about a number 2 tub, I guess it was. And put on there and nailed it down on top of that little sled, put some rope on there and everything so I could pull it. And I took the smoothing irons. We had those old time smoothing irons, that you put on the stove and the handle clipped on. You clip the handle on there when you wanted to use them. Well, you'd clip the handle on and you'd go and iron with it, and when it started cooling off, well, you'd put it back on and take the handle off. But so I hit those irons and wrapped them in wool, wrapped them in a wool cloth. I put a couple of those irons in that tub first, and then I put some quilt thin on it and blankets or whatever there, and then we set the kids in there. And we went down the road a little ways, and we looked in there to see how they was doing. We just went a little ways down there. It was a pretty big snow. I guess it was about 6 or 8 inches deep out there. Anyway, we looked in there, and both of them were sweating. They were both sweating. We had one of them sitting in the other one's kind of in the other one's lap there, and they were just faring fine, but they was too hot. So we found out that we had them too warm, so you cooled them down there, and we got them just about right. And we down the road. I don't know how far we got down the road, but anyway. A lady come along that we knew her, and she come along with the car, and she had one of those old cars. I don't remember now what it was, kind of like an Essex or something, but or maybe an old Studebaker, but it had a trunk on the back. One of those. Well, it didn't have a trunk on, but it had a carrier place that you put the trunk on and buckle the trunk on. And she wanted to give us a ride, and so to give us a ride, we'd had to got rid of the sled, and then when we got to where she wasn't going very far, and when she got off there, well, then we would have had to carry those kids. So I said, no way, we don't want to get rid of the sled. And I said, let my wife ride, and just don't drive too fast till you get down as far as you're going to go there, and I'll sit on the back of the trunk, and I'll sit on the back of the trunk and just hold to the rope. So I did. I sat on the back there, and she didn't drive very fast, about 20, 25 miles an hour, I guess, but that was pretty fast, actually, to be pulling a sled. So, but it was a smooth road, and there was no pavement or anything, but it's on the snow, and it was smooth. So we rolled along there, and we got down to where far she's going. We went on over there. Pulled that sled all the way over there to my folks' house. We had some up and down hill, but it didn't make any difference because I was young and strong. So we just made it fine. We got on over there and we visited with them. And I don't remember now if we stayed a day or so or what. But anyway, they took us home. After that, sometime after that, I don't know what time, we left that guy's place there, but we rented a house. It was still down the road a ways from where we was working for him. We rented a little house from a fellow there, and I don't remember now. We had, in the meantime, I had bought a cow, and I think I owned her when we had the possum deal. Not sure, but I had bought a cow at town anyway, and I had this cow to milk and everything, and so I talked to this old fellow down there, had a little house, pretty nice little house, and wanted to know if we could rent it from him, and we could. We rented it from him, and he didn't give me any details or anything. Well, he had a few rules, but he didn't get around to the days that I could work or the days that I could do anything like that. But I wasn't going to work for him anyway, I don't reckon. I might have been intending to work for him when he had some work. I'm not sure. But anyway, I rented the house, and so I burned wood. I had to burn wood to keep warm. So we had this stove and everything there. I guess we got one when we moved there. I don't know what we had for stove before that, but anyhow, we got. We had a stove, burned wood, I know, because I went to get wood, and now the only kind of wood there was in that country was cottonwood, just cottonwood, and that's kind of a bad wood to burn in a stove, but we got that. We went over there to a fellow I knew, and we'd cut wood on the halves, and we went and cut it. So I went over there and got a load of wood and brought it home, and I brought it back. I brought it on Saturday. And this fellow was a 7-day Adventist, and I didn't know he was a 7-day Adventist, and I didn't know he had any rules like that, so he didn't tell me. But boy, he throwed a fit. I mean, he throwed a fit. In fact, he told me to move because I went out there and hauled that wood home on Saturday. That was his Sunday. And I didn't know. I guess I knew that he was a 7-day Adventist, but I didn't even know that I had to go by his rules. So anyhow, we had to move from there, and so when we left there, I think that we went to see, where did we go from there? Well, I went to